good afternoon, and welcome all of you, partners, speakers, and everyone joining us today for the 10th Nordic Talks Korea at the World Knowledge Forum 2022. My name is Jason Lee. I'm a professor and John Monet Chair in the College of International Studies at Korea University, and I will be your moderator and anchor for today's event. We have prepared a fantastic and inspirational afternoon for you. The event will have two sessions. In the first session, we will focus on the question, how can we close the loop of production and raw materials, the essence of the circular economy? And the following session will focus on how we can expand the use of renewable and regenerative material instead of fossil fuel-based primary materials. So now let's get started with the program. First of all, I would like to introduce Anne-Kari Hansen Ovind, the Norwegian ambassador to South Korea. So she will join the session as a host and also as a panelist. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator and Professor Lee, for this kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be here and join you in celebrating the 10th Nordic Talk in Korea. My name is Anne-Kari Ovind, and I am Norway's ambassador designate to Korea. And in fact, this event is the beginning of a great journey for me in this country, as I just arrived to Korea recently. I'm very pleased to discuss the topic of circularity today, as I have previously worked both in and with the Arctic. And as you know, in the Arctic, where the climate is warming faster than anywhere else, it is a very important question. How can we act more sustainably and use the planet's resources in a better way? And this is really a topic that is of great interest to me. So I look very much forward to the conversation today, the presentation, and the follow-up questions that we will discuss later. Thank you.
Okay, that's right. We are all here to start a conversation, and we have a great speaker lineup for today's discussion. I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Pamela Berg, Science Director at Bloxhop from Denmark. She will share insight, experience, and lessons learned based on the Danish focus on circular transition, both societal and within the built environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Pamela Berg.
Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me here. It's been looking very, very much forward to today. I have called the presentation I'm about to give Circular Economy, Storming, Norming, and Performing. And I hope as I go through my presentation that this will indeed make very much sense. But just before I'll leave this a little bit on the slide, and some of you will start querying the numbers, I'm sure. A little bit about myself. My name is Pernille Berg, as was told. I come from Bloxhop, which is a networking community space. We were established in 2018. We're a public-private partnership established by the City of Copenhagen, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and a philanthropic foundation called Realdania. Bloxhop was established with the main mission of ensuring cross-disciplinary collaboration with the aim of creating sustainable urbanization. And this is why I'm also here, apart from being so happy to accept the invitation, but it's also to share the insights and experiences from a Danish perspective in order to learn mutually from what goes on in the rest of the world, particularly in Korea. And I've called this slide the entangled scales, and to convey with humility that Denmark is a very small country. We're well aware of that. If we look at the population of Copenhagen, we can, on a great day, say we're 1.37 million. But if we count the greater area of Seoul, I know that I have read numbers as far as 27 million. So just to say, in comparison, Denmark is quite small. So why is it that there is relevance to our insights and experiences? I will now turn to. Just 2 weeks ago, a new research was published. It's a collaboration between a research institution and private companies. And they've looked at the Paris Agreement and what we need to do within the construction industry to actually meet the demands of the Paris Agreement, which is, of course, not to exceed the temperatures increase any more than 1.5. If we have to reach those targets, the current practice of construction has to be altered so that we have to reduce the CO2 emission by 96%. I interviewed one of the people partaking in the research project, and he said, it's one of those days when we release this research where we say, please don't shoot the messenger. Because the facts are quite brutal. The other part of the fact is that in Europe alone, we know that there is a major need to renovate buildings. We also know that there is a growing population. I visited Tel Aviv earlier this year, and they expect more than double of population within the next 10 years. They need to build. So the juxtaposition of the current practice of not doing good based on the current resources and the target of reducing our CO2 emissions with the basic need that we need to build, that gives us quite a challenge. So I will actually quote the wonderful Sinus Lynge from Effect, Don't Kill the Messenger. So when I talk about storming, norming, and performing, one of the issues that we are identifying when it comes to the circular economy is this need to construct and build use the resources within our planetary boundaries. And we are overusing. So the storming is that at the moment we use 4 times our planetary resources. So there is a growing awareness that this has to change. So we see this in any kind of shift of paradigm or systemic change, that all of a sudden you will have pioneers, you will have the passionate people that will come out, be it researchers or practitioners, and say, we can change, we must change. So the cities, although they only comprise 3% of Earth, the cities are also said to be part of the largest CO2 sinners. There is a debate going on who actually emits the most CO2. I won't go into that. Suffice it to say, cities comprise of quite a lot of CO2 emissions, obviously also because of energy consumption, but construction as well. In the storming in Denmark, what we've seen is researchers and also research centers, and we have Aarhus University with us here today amongst us, and they will certainly certify to the fact that researchers have actually looked into how to live within planetary boundaries for years. So we have a vast amount of research knowledge in Denmark. But we also have companies that have spent quite a lot of years on focusing how to create and construct sustainable buildings. Some of these companies are part of the storming endeavor, I would say, and we have some good cases and examples in Denmark. One of them has been here before, I know, it's Anders Lennager from Lennager Group, And he has been one of the advocates to say we need to build differently. We need to base our construction and our urban design based on circular principles. And that storming, I would also say in a Danish context, is still going on. But we do see signs of norming. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we have increasing research and applied research emerging. There is a knowledge, an embedded knowledge that is beginning to feed into policymakers. So we can see the legal parameters beginning to be in play. As you will see, I have in the performing, you have the EU legislation emerging. So within the EU system and Danish system, we're beginning to create standards for circular construction or circular materials in general. So the transition to the circular economy entails the holistic approach to the systemic change. We need not only to get the practices and knowledge on board, but we also need to ensure that the best practices on how to do these things are actually shared and disseminated. And you need the push and the pull factor. I know that we hopefully will get into that later on in the debate. These different phases of the systemic change are existing in parallels because you do have companies that are already basing their business model on circular economy, and they're thriving. We see again in Denmark, we had Blender Group that created a new company called Again, which is focusing on bio-based materials. And one of the experiences from that company is that there is actually a huge demand for materials that are bio-based. I met Christian Wittrup, who's the CEO of Again, and I asked him, what are your experiences, Christian? And he said, my experiences are thus. We have an amazing demand. Now we also have to teach the consumers on how to use these types of materials. And this is part of the systemic change. It's not just that we need to have a demand, but we also need to know how to comply with the demand. So the demand may be intellectual as a private consumer. We may want to live in as sustainably as possible within our building, but do we have the knowledge and the practice to support that endeavor? This is where we see the norming and performing coming into play again, because once we share the best practices, the best advice, that's when we can start seeing the full transition to the circular economy. One of the things that we know when we're looking at circularity and circular economy from the built environment's perspective are these 7 aspects. And I'm sure I'll be interrupted when I've used my time. But we need to start looking at waste as a resource and not a waste. There are many different, we've just been in the garden where we heard how a banana peel is no longer considered waste, but actually a resource to creating a beverage. When it comes to construction, this is of course much more difficult. Because do you demolish or do you take things apart gently bit by bit? That requires also knowledge because which type of material from the building can be used again and in what way. I'll get back to that. Construction as a bank of resources. One of the things that are absolutely amazing when we talk about city development and construction is that there lies a plethora of information and knowledge and material and practices within construction that can be used. The other thing is also in the circular loop, if we start looking at the various pieces of a construction of a building as a bank, that specific material can go into a new loop of the economy. And we have a Danish example of that called Circle Bank, where they are creating a digital platform that will ensure transparency for the client that wants the new building or that wants the new city to source the materials and require in-depth knowledge as to what that material possesses of attributes and also their CO2 emissions. If we look at use of virgin materials, and I know this will be mentioned in the subsequent debate, I hope, we are running out of virgin materials. In the construction industry, this is also the case. So we need to start not using the virgin materials, but reuse the existing materials, and also experience and identify the many potentials and richness that lies in the aspect of biomimicry. What we're seeing in Denmark and also in other parts of Europe is a huge level of curiosity in applying bio-based materials in construction. This is not necessarily a novel practice. If we go back centuries or a few generations in construction practices, we will see that this was actually in play previously, but we have forgotten. And we need to reconnect with those various different types of construction practices and also usage of bio-based materials that were actually in play. So just to move, the difficulties, moving on in the list here, the difficulties in terms of construction is, as in other industries as well, is the amazing use of composite materials. The problem is that when we have these types of materials, they're very, very difficult to decipher and then enter into the circular loop. So this is a manifold process where we have to stop using these types of materials that cannot enter the circular loop, as well as ascertaining how to reduce the consumption of these types of materials. Climate benefit from reuse. That may seem banal and easy, but we need to document it. One of the things that at the moment in Denmark, and we have a new law coming into play, is that there's an increasing usage of life cycle assessment and analysis in the construction industry. From the 1st of January 2023, there will be a new law in play where new constructions over a limit of square meters will have to comply with LCA analysis. The problem is, to some, is that this life cycle analysis is based on one method alone, which may not be fruitful for the circular loop in terms of ascertaining the climate benefit from reusing. That is to say, the current analysis looks at one generation of using the material and not multiple generations. So we need to obtain more knowledge in documenting the climate benefit from reuse. And I know this may also seem, and we just heard it from Oatly, there is actually an economic potential from transitioning to the circular economy. One thing is the optimization within the company, but the other thing is also that there is new needs for circular knowledge that can generate new businesses. One of the things in Southern Europe, we are facing a very high level of youth unemployment. One of the things in transitioning to circular construction is actually labor intensive. So it can also be a way to ensure skilled labor and create new jobs. Then to go to the last but not least, in transitioning to a systemic change, we will always need policy, strategies, and framework conditions. But I'd just like to add that in Denmark, the legal parameters for the public sector to warrant circular construction already exists. It's about ensuring the knowledge to the public sector in how to demand new construction. There. Time was up, my sign, and so thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Berg, for an inspirational introduction of the Danish circular economy and the great vision for future built environment research. So now I would like to switch scene and turn to our first Nordic Talks sofa session. As we see, we are sitting in sofa and just like sitting in the living room. So we will chat, we will talk, and among the panelists, but also with the audience. So, for the audience to engage and take part in the discussion, please ask your question through the Slido using your phones and the QR code you have given at the entrance. So, and then we will select some of the question and bring them to the conversation. Okay, so let me first ask one question each to the panelists. Norway, like the rest of other Nordic countries, is globally acknowledged for its circular economy strategy and the green economy, and also the cutting-edge research. So, Ambassador, could you share any insight into what Norway is currently doing in relation to circular economy?
Thank you. And first of all, let me just share that for the Nordic countries, it is a given that the future must be circular. But we do not see the transition to a circular economy to be a goal in itself. It is really a process that will contribute to the value creation and sustainability on the way to achieve, our overarching goal, and that is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That is very important. Whereas in Norway, we have what we call the extended producer responsibility that has really for decades contributed to environmentally sound waste management and a high, I would say, rate of recycling. Today, 91% of all plastic drink bottles with deposits are returned to the deposit return system, and only a very few amount really find its way to the environment and the ocean. And I just wanted to add, if I can, I'd like to also applaud the Korean government's decision recently to launch a disposable cup deposit system, which I believe will do much to change behavior and reduce waste. And let me also add that, luckily, the entrepreneurial Norwegian back in the time saw the opportunity already, and we are talking about the 70s in 1972, that recycling must be made in a very simple manner so that actually consumers will use the system. And I remember as a kid, it was very popular to collect bottles and get some money in return. So that worked really. But we have to introduce a groundbreaking reverse vending machines, and that was done little by little in Norway. And again, to make it easy for consumers to use. And this led to the establishment of a company called Tomra, which is a leading Norwegian producer of these machines in Norway today. And actually, this company is established in 80 markets globally. The company continues really to develop new innovations to close the loop in other production chains as well. So we can start with bottle collections, but that experience need to be fed into larger cycles of production. Let me just end responding to your question by saying that, recycling, it's not all about recycling. We need a life cycle approach to the problem. This means that we also need to design to recycle in the very first place, and you touched upon that, Pernille. One such example is another company that I'd like to just highlight. It's named Infinitum, which has found several solutions to create new products for plastic and design bottles that are especially made for recycling. So that is taking it a step further. Well, I can go on, but I'd like to say that innovation, it's absolutely necessary. Economic incentives and the polluter pays principle is essential. And then regulations, as you touched upon. These measures combined really drive developments in the sector. And in the case of Norway, this seems to have been quite successful so far.
Wonderful. Okay, the next question will go to Pramil. The Korean government announced an implementation plan for the so-called the Korean circular economy, with various policies to reduce waste and strengthen resource circularity. To work on those actions, we actually need the best practice and lessons learned about how to make buildings circular and climate neutral. In that sense, your presentation was truly inspirational. So could you share what were, based on your experience, what were the main challenges in creating the ecosystem for the circular build environment in Denmark or in Europe? And what were the key factors in overcoming those challenges, either regulation, technology, etc.?
Thank you very much. That's a beautiful question also because it's very tough. But I'll try and answer it. I think one of the biggest challenges facing the construction industry is actually, and this is worldwide, that the construction industry invests almost the least of research and development in the industry in the world. And this also characterizes the Danish construction industry. So this is actually knowledge and innovation capacity is a really, really big barrier. When a sector invests that little in research and development, then how do we ensure that knowledge actually sparks the innovation? And we know from global research that innovation comes from research. So that's one challenge, that we need more knowledge in the construction industry. This is also why, as in my position, that I have the honor of curating research networks so that I can ensure that we can disseminate research knowledge as expediently as possible. And we have in Denmark a Danish innovation fund that supports industrial research. And by forming specific networks within the construction industry or the built environment, this has been one answer to remedy that barrier. The other barrier and the other challenge is that the construction industry is characterized by having an almost incomprehensible value chain. So the lack of transparency is actually a challenge. So it would be easy for me to say policy and regulation, because then we think we can fix it with a little dabble. But with the culture and the practices within the industry has been one of the challenges. And I want to quote one of the pioneers within circular economy in Denmark, Kasper Gullager. He said at some point, what is lacking in the industry is a shared language. We don't speak the same language within the construction industry. So when the engineer and the architect and the urban planner and the decision maker and the plumber, etc., when they don't have a shared language. So, two challenges that actually can be overcome, but those are the ones. And our experience is that once you start sharing knowledge, once you start actually developing a common language, then things can, going back to the storming and norming, then all of a sudden there is a shared understanding of what we have to do and how we have to do it. And then I can come with also some concrete examples. We know in the construction, when we build a building, it's actually the building site that causes a lot of waste. So then how do we ensure that we know what not to throw out or where to dispose of it? So we have some very fascinating research projects actually looking into the particularities of the construction site and how to ensure collaboration on the site, going back to the shared language again.
Okay, well, that was truly an insight from the practitioner and researcher. So it's not just about the regulation and what we can see from outside, but actually the common language and communication, the culture, practice, and certainly that would be, well, in Korea, I feel exactly the same, same problems and same things. So yes, certainly that would be greatly helpful. Okay, I'm wondering whether we will have time for the floor Q&As. Do we have any? Okay, so far, but feel free to raise your question. Okay, so before wrapping up, just let me ask just one final short the statement to the two panelists, maybe 1 minute maximum, but the quick, high impact, and the audience may want to something to carry at home. So I will ask for the final statement. So, Ambassador.
Thank you. Well, my message will be that we need to change our way of thinking of circular economy, away from it being a burden on business to being, a business opportunity. Circular economy is not only about taking care of the environment, but also about fostering competitiveness for our businesses. And the winners will be those who are moving ahead in a green direction and not those who are lagging behind. And I was reflecting on the vision or the saying that Oatly just announced when they had their presentation. And I wanted only to paraphrase it a little bit and say, well, producing and consuming without waste, that's our goal.
Okay.
I think one of the many attractive aspects of the circular economy is actually looking at society as a whole, the holistic approach. When we look at the current situation that we're facing in the world, we cannot fix it without education. We cannot fix it without healthcare sector working. We cannot fix it without collaboration. We know that we like to live in cities. There is an attraction in cities, so we need to focus on ensuring a holistic solution. So the winners are definitely the ones that will, in terms of business, that will see the green opportunities. But from a societal perspective, we also need to ensure that we have social mobility. It is still one of the things that we all have as part of the SDGs, the right to a good life. So for me, the vision is that we end up designing the irresistible circular society where we can all see ourselves living and thriving in close relation within the planetary boundaries.
Great. So thank you so much for fruitful discussion. I want to have 1 more hour for this panel with this panelist, but actually we have to move on. So we will now move on with the second session, where we will take a deep dive into rethink and replace of raw materials in textile industry. I will shortly come back with the second session's panelist and speaker. And finally, please give a big warm applause to this wonderful panelist. All right, welcome back. And after the inspirational first panel, let's move on to our second session. I'm here on the stage with Ambassador Daniel Werven from Sweden, and Kirsterna from Finland. Okay, so first, I will invite Swedish Ambassador Daniel Worven to the floor. Ambassador, welcome on board.
Thank you, Professor Lee, dear Jae-sung. It's a pleasure to be here. I will be your host and your panelist for this brief session. And in this session, we will introduce the concept of circular economy and illustrate how the application of circular concepts can contribute to building a healthier, less harmful, and more sustainable textile industry. And as I sat in the audience, I was actually thinking about this concept that the World Knowledge Forum has put up of supercompensation, restoring global prosperity and freedom. And I think there is a great connect here with circularity, circular economy, and the task that lies before us right now of restoring prosperity and perhaps achieving prosperity in different ways than we've had before. So great, we have a great lineup of yet another expert speaker within the area. We also have you, the audience, and as Professor Lee said earlier, we hope that you will continue to engage. I've also been asked to remind you of using hashtags when you post on social media, Nordic Talks Korea and Nordic Talks. This is an important platform that we like to continue to publicize. But with that, I leave the word back to you, Jae-sung.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now, for today's second keynote speaker, I would like to introduce Kirsterna, Key Account Director of Infinited Fiber Company from Finland. Kirsterna is Infinited Fiber Company's key account director and networker extraordinaire. Well, she joined the fashion technology startup in 2017 and is on a mission to make circularity in textile an everyday reality. So you are opening a new chapter in the textile industry. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Kirsterna.
Are we getting the slides? Yes. So I could be talking about the doom and gloomy, but I'm not. I'm actually here to present the future, and I'm wearing it today. This is the future of textiles. This is totally recycled material that I'm wearing. So we say that it's time for textile industry to lose its virginity. What that means is that there is no need to use virgin materials anymore. And that is something that we all need to remember from this day. So we are a technology powerhouse. We are not fabric manufacturers, we are not making apparel. We are actually making technology. And that technology allows textiles to be circular. So our mission is to take textile industry to the next level, to the circularity. And that should be an everyday reality, like you said. Our solution is to give the cellulose-rich textiles a new life by regenerating fibers out of cotton waste. And that is something that is very technical, that is a chemical process, but at the same time, what it produces is a totally new type of fiber that has a soft touch and feel like cotton. So you don't have to feel bad about wearing the recycled material. It's like the things that you have been used to wear. And our philosophy is that nothing needs to be grown in the land. There was a talk about a growing population. We need food. We need that land for growing food, not textiles. So Now I'm introducing Infina. Infina is a new fiber that is made out of post-consumer textile waste. So post-consumer textile waste means those textiles that comes from your closets, the ones that you don't want to wear anymore. And our fiber itself that is used, for example, to this garment, is regenerated 100% out of that. It's soft, it's natural, it's a true alternative to virgin materials. And the cool thing is that it's still biodegradable, it doesn't shed any microplastics, and it has only natural ingredients. And it's saving water. Water is a big topic at the moment. If we think about producing 1 kilogram of cotton, it takes 20,000 liters of water. Producing the same amount of Infina is 50 liters. So it's a totally different game. So, Infina in action. We are very glad that we had taken our brand partners to this road. We have provided them a solution for the problem that they are facing every day. There's fast and fast brands that look solution for how to recycle the materials that comes back into take-back collections. There haven't been any solution so far. So our solution is one of those. These are actually some of the examples from the collections that we have made with the brand partners. The brands has been making, for example, the first one with the Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones is wearing 100% Infina denim. There is, the other picture is Wrangler jeans. So there is a lot of these things that are already happening. So we are bringing hope to the whole textile industry. But all the business is in scale. That's what needs to be remembered. And I'm always saying circularity doesn't happen if there isn't business. Business is essential. And business is in scale. So what we are doing at the moment, we have a small pilot factories in Finland where we are producing some amount of fiber for brands to test, brands to really bring to the markets, test what is the market entry, how the consumers feel about it. And that is just a small drop in the ocean. So we have been planning to build a factory in Finland, near Santa Claus, in Lapland. And that is something that is really driving the whole industry to the next level. But still, 30,000 tons per annum of Infina, that could be H&M's one collection during the year. That is still very small. So even though it helps, it's not a solution. It needs to be scaled more. And that's why we are really aiming to technology licensing. What that means is that the technology that we have created will be then transferred all over the world for our licensing partners to start producing Infina. And that is the solution for cotton textiles. We can't do this alone. We need an ecosystem. That is the most important thing. There is, first of all, textile sorters that needs to be there. Somebody needs to collect the material and sort that so we can get the cotton heavy stream. I have been having wonderful discussions here in Korea about how that could be working. And I think that there is lots of good bases in here when you are collecting the materials in the boxes. And that just needs to be sorted. There needs to be a solution. Then there could be multiple companies, not only Infinity Fiber Company, but multiple companies that are then handling the waste. Infinity Fiber can take the cotton part. Then there is yarn makers, fabric makers, there is garment makers. Everybody needs to come together to create this. Brands are very important. They can drive the business. At the same time, who would be better to influence to the brands than the consumer? So every single one in this room, remember that next time when you buy something, you make a conscious choice, and that is driving the business for the brand. And then the brands are more eager to make this change. And of course, there is a lot of needs of engineering partners. We need equipment providers to do that. So everybody that has some kind of machinery that could be used, for example, this kind of collaboration is on interest of us. We want to talk. We want to create a circular economy in textiles. We are very glad that there is also certification parties, there's legislations, there is a lot of these NGOs that are working very heavily on this case. And those are all helping the whole textile industry to change from vertical to circular. And that is one of the most important things to remember, that through those legislations, through those certifications that is created to really provide traceability, to provide transparency, we are in the next level. And I thank you with some of the other collection partners. And there is, for example, in the middle, I would say that if Zara would be here standing with me today, they would say that, okay, we made a collection, it works, it sells, and it's going to be the future of textiles. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kirsi. It was truly inspiring to hear about your approach to the circularity in textile industry. And wow, nowadays, yes, it's truly the recycled material, the clothing.
Yes, and what I'm wearing today, this is 100% Infino.
Okay, so we are, well, the change of paradigm. So we need a new way of thinking. Okay, so now I will open the second sofa session once again. Here we are sitting in the living room, and we will be happy to talk among ourselves and with the guest. So, and for the audience, you can also use the Slido app or the QR code to raise question. Okay, first question to Daniel, but as I mentioned earlier, I would have asked yet another simpler question, such as the Swedish membership to NATO or something, but allow me to ask tough question. Okay, so what action can policymaker to ensure more sustainable textile production, as well as consumption? Or do you have any good example from Sweden on this kind of circular economy and industries?
Thank you, and I wanted to thank you as well for a really intriguing talk. It makes one wonder what one is wearing, what material we have in our own suits and clothes. But I wanted to answer that question. I wanted to tie in a little bit to what you said of being a technology-driven and a technology heavy company. Because we, as policymakers, one thing that we can do is really to ensure that the right conditions are in place for research and for innovation, so that sustainable methods and materials can be developed and provided to the market, which I think is exactly what you're doing. There's one example from Sweden that I wanted to share, which is something called the Research Institutes of Sweden, which is financed and owned by the state. And they've collaborated with a group of Swedish clothing companies, well-known names in Sweden, perhaps less so here, but Peak Performance, Fristads, TST, and many others. And through this collaboration, they managed to increase the traceability throughout the supply chain and also to facilitate sorting processes prior to recycling. So that is one example of how innovation has contributed to this goal. And then very quickly, I also wanted to say that we as policymakers can really implement regulatory measures in the sense that we have a responsibility to make it easy for consumers to choose sustainable products. Thank you.
Indeed, R&D, giving incentives and giving proper regulation and setting the standard. Yes, for certainly the policy makers should collaborate with these innovators too. Okay, and the next question will go to Kirsi. the Korea is a major textile company. Nowadays, Korea is famous for semiconductor, cell phone, and other IT products. But a couple decades ago, Korea was a leading textile company, and that actually drove up the early stage of industrialization in Korea. But the textile industry is certainly moving into the next generation, and we are at the stage to talk about real new material and recycled material. So, it's just a wonderful idea. But I think. But I guess the road toward this stage of startup and new renewable the resources, materials might not been that easy. So what were the major obstacles in scaling up the production and bringing this item to the existing market and also in the global market?
I would say it starts with the kind of like demand. And demand needed to be there first. And when there was a demand, then when there was a way. But I think that's, of course, for the startup, it's always funding. It's money. Money is always hard to harvest. So I think that this is, of course, something that we have been working very heavily on. But having the support from the global brands has been helping us a lot. And I think that's kind of like getting through those obstacles with the partners that we have achieved is much easier than really going with very techie side. I think that Finns, we are very good at being technology geeks, but we are very poor in selling, but we are getting much better.
Yeah, well, that is truly, that is truly a part. But yes, but so, well, for any kind of the innovation, we need collaboration. So the policymakers, innovators, marketing experts, and giving some new ideas and new symbols. And so yes, but certainly that is certainly a part of our next business model. And
can I add on that? I think that there is one very wise woman that said that there is no chicken and egg problem. Everything needs to be born at the same time. So I think that it's same in everything. I think that the ecosystem needs to be born at the same time. And that is the tricky part. And I think that really understanding the ecosystem is the first thing that you need to know.
Okay, so wonderful chicken omelet at the same time. Well, yes, healthy ecosystem, that will be very important, the keyword. Okay, so may I open the floor? Is there any, or we can go. Yep, oops, yes. Oh, I can see. Okay, a couple of questions. And all from the same person called Anonymous. Okay, so, yes, a lot for the raw materials. Okay, let's go for the first one. We talked a lot about recycling plastics. But isn't it also important to go for renewable sources? Design for recycling is great, but what about raw material?
Yeah, recycling itself, it's not an easy topic. If you think about recycling plastics, there is, for example, lots of common misunderstandings about, for example, how the waste should be treated. Yeah. And I think that the raw materials itself, to be waste, if the waste is a raw material, then you need to be selecting what you take. And that is a hard part. It would be perfect that there would be a Willy Wonka machine that you can throw in anything and you get new products out of it. But it doesn't happen like that. And I think that there is a lot to do in a kind of like selecting the raw materials, how that is really sorted. And the waste needs to be sorted a little bit differently so we can really harvest all the resources in there. And I think that it's really is about making the waste management system to really support that.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, but what about maybe one more question to Kirsi, and I will move to Daniel. Okay, so the second question to Kirsi is actually recycling cotton. Yes, well, cotton is very kind of our favorite and widely used material into new textile fibers. And do you have any in-house research on this?
Yeah, so we have already really created a commercial fiber. So we are in very far on that. So recycling cotton through our technology is already a solution. It doesn't need much more research. Of course, there is some things that you need to adjust, and there are some things that needs to be improved. But at the moment, we are brave enough to build a large-scale factory. So I think that it is already there. We have in-house R&D, of course, all the time. They are working very heavily on the next solutions. This could be, for example, agricultural waste. It could be cardboard waste, paper waste, and there is a lot of opportunities in this area. And all that could be a resource for the new textile fibers. And I think that the cellulose is the key ingredient. So that is something that really grows in our fibers also.
Okay. And the next question will go to the Ambassador Robin. We actually talk a lot about the green transition and circular economy. This kind of the circularity is a key concept of sustainability. But at the same time, we are worrying about the issue of greenwashing. So, which one is truly green and which one is greenwashing? So we are becoming more and more sensitive on this. So, any remark on the greenwashing issue?
Very briefly, I think one important, and this is a complex question, of course, but I think one important component of this is to have these types of discussions, encourage transparency when it comes to how you measure green transition, how you measure and look at what companies do. I think on the whole, when we see not only Swedish companies but certainly Nordic companies in general here, they are way ahead and far ahead when it comes to the green transition, and they are doing this for real.
Thank you very much. So I have a couple more questions, but since our time is limited, so I may have to wrap up the question, the Q&A part. But some of you may ask the question after the session to some panelists. And so as a final part, I will give once again each presenter a turn for final testimony. And the final message, the audience will bring home and write in their diaries tonight. So the final message.
Final message, that is easy. Think what you consume. Go to stores, look at the labels, make the conscious choice, allow the circularity, demand, and then, in the end, ask for better.
Better?
Mine is similar, actually, and it's to Korean consumers just to be demanding. And I think for us who have the honor and privilege to live in this country, we know that Koreans have incredibly high standards when it comes to quality and design. You really always look for the best. And my last word is, please also look for the best when it comes to sustainability.
Yes, great. Actually, when we are talking about circular economy, a lot of people might have wondered, isn't it too technical? Isn't it kind of like really advanced, the agenda? However, I think sustainability and circular economy agenda will be the easiest one we can find really in our everyday life, and we can find the renewables of raw materials, the plastic issues. So certainly that is real our everyday agenda. So in that sense, I think it was a great session to link the Nordic experience of circular economy and ongoing the Korean effort to build the Korean version of circular economy and circular society. So once again, I truly am grateful for the panelists and the audience. Upon that note, I will turn the mic to Liz for a wrap-up. Do we have a separate wrap-up or? Okay, then if you allow me, then once again, I will be privileged to wrap up the session. And just one word, please give warm round of applause to our wonderful panelist and ambassador. Thank you very much. And also, I thank the great audience today for your deep interest and deep attention. So once again, big round of applause for all of us. Now I will wrap up the Nordic Talk Korea session. Thank you very much.